Okay, welcome everyone, and welcome to implementing landmarks in your software design. This is one of the first webinars that I've done with Stark, and so we've got a couple technical glitches, and I apologize for that, and I apologize for you folks having to wait a little bit. With me today, I have Tanguy, Tanguy Girac, and he and I both work at Stark full-time. Tanguy is our senior product designer. I'm head of strategy. And we're both going to be talking to you today about how landmarks work and specifically how to include them in your workflow when you're designing and in the handoff to engineers. So, a couple housekeeping items before we get started. Captions should be enabled for everyone. So if you need them, you should see a button that says CC or live transcript at the bottom, and you should be able to enable captions. Like I said, we have Beth here for today's webinar, and let us know in chat if you need any other sort of help from us or if there's anything else we can do for you. Another thing, and this is if the chat gets like real out of hand, is if you do have a question for one of us, please prefix it with a Q and a colon so we can read through the chat real quickly and see which questions you have for us. And we're going to have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end, naturally, especially with this many people joining us today. So allow me to give us a little bit of context for today. So real question is, when you're dealing with screen readers and when you have a website and someone who is blind is coming to your website with a screen reader, how are they interpreting your content? So a lot of this is basically that you're taking a 2D visual experience and then you're converting it into a one-dimensional experience. So let's start with the first layer. So the first layer, we're basically taking a layout and we're converting it to screen text. So you see a piece of a layout. I used to work at a cruise company, so I was like, let's take an example, a travel example with a cruise to Alaska. And on the left, you see a snapshot of a piece of the page. On the right, you see essentially a snapshot of what text the screen reader would be reading for this. But if you're sighted like me, we're kind of cheating here because instead of seeing it as long text, we're basically seeing a paragraph of text that we can scan in about a second or two. So, and we're also seeing caps and we're seeing punctuation. So let's take the caps and the punctuation out first. And now you've got a big ball of text. But even that, as a sighted person, we're cheating because we can jump ahead lines. So really, the sort of experience that you have is kind of like, it's a long strip of text. So I don't know if any of you ever did mixtapes for somebody or worked, have a cassette, but this is kind of the experience that you have. You just have this big long string of text and you can move forward and backwards in it. And for somebody who's using a screen reader, if you were going to read the entire contents of a long page, it would probably take you about 20 minutes to a half hour to read that at normal speed. So a lot of us, we kind of adapt to that by, either speeding up. A lot of blind folks who are screen readers users, we'll speed it up to like 4 times the regular speed of human speech, or you're going to want some way of jumping around forwards and backwards. So if you can think of like, say, a YouTube video with just a picture, you moving forwards and backwards, you're just sampling little pieces of the audio as you go. So what you'd want is you want some sort of fence posts to take you through this. So today we're going to be covering landmarks and how those work and how you can use like really large HTML elements, real top level elements, and you can go through those and essentially jump to different fence posts in the file. So this helps quite a bit. Now, there's other ways that you can also jump around. So you have landmarks, you have headings, You have actionable items. By that, most people would mean links. So with landmarks, you can use a key like an L key or a D key, depending on the screen reader you're using, and that would jump you from one landmark to the next in a screen reader. If you were using headings, you'd be jumping around using maybe an H key, or there'd be a certain gesture that you use on your iPhone, with VoiceOver to be able to move you forward through us. And actionable items, basically you'd be using the tab key to jump through those. So you've got kind of like three different ways of jumping forward and backward depending on how you want to go through your page. So maybe you want to do landmarks first to get a gist of what the structure of the page is. Maybe headings first because there's a lot of text content and you want to navigate that semantically. Or maybe it's links because you kind of know what you already want to do and you want to jump to the good part, where you're able to input text or you're able to, get to where the calls to action are fairly quickly. So these are like three very different ways that you have of being able to navigate a page. So Dongi, I know I haven't given you much of a chance to chat yet.
No worries.
But this is kind of like to cue it up for you, to kind of like set it up so people know, okay, landmarks, this is one way of navigating a page, and this is how we could handle this. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to actually toss over the screen share to you. I'll have you pick that up on your end, and then you can show us basically how this works on an actual page.
Sure. So can everyone see my screen?
I can see it perfectly.
All right, thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Tanguy, and as Claudio said, I am a product designer at Stark. So now that Claudio explained how landmarks work and what they are, you might be able to see the problem with some designs such as the one that I'm showing here. So for example, this is a design that I just created, again, jumping on the travel idea. So as you can see, there are a couple of links, and you would have to tap through that to go to the actual content. And so if we scroll through that page, you can see that there are multiple sections. You don't specifically have titles, and you don't specifically have ways of going there quickly, at least right now. So the good way to do that is by using landmark. And so since Claudio explained how they work, let me show you how we are going at Stark to help you implement them. So as you may have seen, we've released a blog post recently, and we've implemented landmark into both Figma and Sketch. Adobe XD compatibility is coming soon, but let me show you how it works in Figma. So for example, if you take a look at that website, we can see that we have a header that would probably be repeated across multiple pages. So I'm going to select that header. I'm using the landmark plugin. So let's say, actually, I'm cheating a little bit because I kind of tried that before, of course. So let's roll that back. So I selected that header. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm selecting the header landmark and I'm adding it. What you can see is that it will pull the name of your actual layers and put it as a name next to header. Now, when the developer comes to your design, they will see that you have identified that section of your design to be a header. Now, of course, if you're still designing and it gets in the way, you can always hide it, but it's there. But now you might be wondering, okay, landmarks, I see what they are doing. I see why they are important, but I'm not that familiar with landmark. So we've also implemented a small help section that you can find in the top right corner. And what this help section does is giving you a brief introduction on landmarks, as well as breaking down the role of each individual landmarks. So if we take a look here, for example, we have the nav landmark, which it's pretty straightforward, but it's a short for navigation. And so like it's used to hold menus and social media links and so on and so forth.
So yeah, it's important to note like header and nav, I mean, are stuff that gets repeated on every single page. So it really adds to your time scanning a page if you have to have that read to you every single time. So really, I mean, you're putting header and nav in there as a courtesy to a screen reader user so that they know, hey, if I've heard this already, I can skip it.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for chiming in, and don't hesitate to do it again, Claudio. Um, so now I have my header, but we can also identify that we have a navigation in there. So let's add that and see how it works. So again, I will take my main navigation, select the navigation landmark, and add it. And as you can see, we've also highlighted that. So that's for the main navigation. Just by doing these two small stuff, if your developers implement this, then you're already helping a ton of people. You're helping them because then we will highlight the main content, which is what is of interest to most people. So I
Right.
will, yeah, go
And
ahead.
the other thing about main is that the beginning of main is where most people want to begin to read the page.
Exactly. So now we have highlighted our main landmark. And the good thing is we can continue doing so in a really easy way for pretty much every section or every other part of our designs. So if I take the main content, for example, here I can see that I have a secondary navigation. So I will also mark that. And again, as you can see, it's taking the name of your layers. So it's pretty easy for you to identify which landmark you have already implemented. Then we have, so this to me looks like a section, but if I'm not sure, I can always go back. The section element is a useful landmark for splitting up elements like main. That seems good to me. So I can add a section here.
So one of the things about screen readers and how they go through landmarks is they only go through the top level ones. So it's like, you know, only the parent ones are the ones that are read by the screen reader, with the exception of section. So section is what you want to do if you want to flag something like inside of a big giant scrolling main area. That's really the landmark that you're going to want to use for that.
Yeah, exactly. And I can kind of relate because that page again is quite long, as are most of website, but most travel website. And when you have to discover content, for example. So here, I can see that I have another section that is dedicated to buying tickets. So let's highlight that.
So the other thing to note here is that the designers or the design of the page doesn't have a header for this, but you know, you've got like a card grid going on there. So landmarks are also good for flagging parts of your page that don't necessarily have a semantic header for them already.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's in my opinion a great tool to like bridge the gap between designers and developers, because you don't necessarily have to have dedicated titles for each part if that is covered through landmarks, for example. So here we have a video. Let's add another section and then some highlights. And by the way, I'm from France, so I am shamelessly promoting France. All right, let's jump. Ooh, so that to me looks like a new element. So as you can see, our main section is ending here. And now we're here, we have a footer basically. So let me try and add this. Okay, so I have highlighted my footer. What you will see and what we did with that functionality is we made sure that the landmark would be visible no matter your background. So whether it's a photo, a light background or a dark background, we've made sure that the dashed line, the dotted line will be visible anyway. So we have that footer, and in a footer, we will have many links and sometimes a way to subscribe to a newsletter, for example. And that to me looks like a form. So I'm going to add that.
So form is another one like section, that it doesn't have to be the topmost element to be able for the screen reader to pick it up and announce it. So that's another thing to be aware of.
Yeah.
So we're getting a lot of questions here, Dongi. Maybe we want to take a minute to answer. So one question.
Yeah, I can run. Oh, okay, Claudia. I was going to say I'm happy to field these for you guys. If you want to just hang back, I can run through them for you.
Yeah, Kat, why don't you go ahead?
If it makes life easier, yeah, I'm happy to. So shamelessly, the first question I shared. So we'll do that. I said, can you speak about the differentiation between landmarks and web design versus software design? How does that get bifurcated? And yeah, any thoughts there?
Dongi, do you want to take that? I'll take it gladly.
Go ahead.
Okay, so on the web, you have discrete elements that are, HTML tags that are, there's a set of them that create landmarks. And that's how it works in HTML. Now, from the little bit of coding that I've done in Xcode, those sort of discrete elements that are landmarks don't exist. You're dealing with containers, and you're dealing with your regular stack of elements. So a lot of it comes down to how you use those elements and how you give them accessible names. So one of the things that I think we missed in explaining this is that a landmark needs to have an accessible name for it to be picked up by the screen reader. So it's one thing that you have a header or you have a main, but the main has to have a name to it as well. And so basically, if you were doing a native app or something, you'd be using those sort of elements, and you'd be giving them accessible names that work like names in landmarks, and you'd be using those as top level elements in your DOM, in your stack.
Ooh, thank you. Let me see. The next question is from Mark. Mark said, or rather, Mark asked, is this Stark landmark a Figma component or an accessibility annotation? This is a direct question about Stark itself. So
I can go ahead if you want.
yeah, go, Tongi.
So basically, as of right now, we are adding, and actually this is also, I will answer two questions in one. I saw another questions that is, will these landmarks show up in a PDF export? And so it's kind of related. As you can see here on the list of layers, this is actually a group that is there that you can hide or display. And so this is part of the document itself. So if you export that frame, for example, these will show in the export. And so it's more of an accessibility annotation as of right now in Figma and Sketch.
Thanks, Tongi. Lou asked, is there anything to consider regarding ordering the landmarks from top to bottom, ordering by type?
Well, I mean, I would think what you want to do is you want to try to follow the order that things would appear in the DOM as naturally as possible. So you want the reading order of your landmarks to match the reading order of the code. I think in all societies, even right to left, I mean, we're dealing top to bottom with your landmarks. So I think that is the safest approach you can have. And that's the approach that I would recommend, so that you don't end up with any sort of weirdness there. But again, I mean, these are fence posts that you're giving intentionally to parts of your page. And so I can't think of a use case in which it would be to anyone's benefit to change that order.
Yeah, exactly. If I can add something, it's also, there is this representation on your design. For example, it's actually a good example. Here you have a navigation within a header, and this is visually represented as the header is around the navigation. So again, I think I will agree with Claudio on that one. I wouldn't think grouping elements by type would make sense, but
Cool. Let me pull that back up, the chat, because here we are. Next question is from Kristen. Kristen asked, can you embed landmarks in components, in Figma components? And actually one of our product designers, Treg, who is here, asked, I'm curious, what would that do for you having landmarks at the component level? Kristen, I'm unsure if you want to chime in before. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So we are ramping up our org to be more accessible. And so we're thinking about how can we make this as easy as possible, right? So one of the things that would be awesome is if we can kind of embed these into some of the reusable components, right? Then no one has to think about this ARYA label. It'll be used consistently and it'll be easy. So that's my thought. That's what I'm trying to drive for. So that was my question.
Yeah.
Behind my question.
That's absolutely great. We just always, you'll find when chatting to us, we get a little bit nitpicky to really get to the root. So we make sure that we answer not just one, but maybe some scaffolding questions. So you should be able to embed landmarks into components. Components work the same as a normal frame. They can just be instanced. I'm unsure whether or not you'd be able to still hide or show them as normal, but admittedly, we haven't tried. So if you want to try and get back to us, that would be fun.
Sure. Yeah, Treg says we can. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna give it a shot.
Perfect. Okay. Next question, we have a few from Joshua. Joshua asked, question 1, how do we balance proper accessibility without impairing the visual experience for fully sighted users? I've read articles that spotlight the potential inhuman outcomes via the modern accessibility algorithm. For example, components can fail ADA requirements, yet actually perform better in human visual tests.
I almost could say I know which article he's referring to.
Yeah. Same.
I came across one, and I give you some. I have a lot of questions there. I apologize. I just have a 65-page ADA document from Bank of America on my desk that I have to resolve for a legacy product that I own now. So I have a wide range of questions that may not be fully on topic here. I apologize. But I'm just up to my eyeballs in ADA.
I don't know whether to pity you or congratulate you.
I was hesitating to be like congratulations, and at the same time, like lots of luck.
Or how about just welcome?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So yeah, the root question was, how do we balance proper accessibility without impairing the visual experience for fully sighted users? I will at one point hand this over to Claudio or Tanguy, or for that matter, any one of our other team members that are on here.
I was going to say, welcome to Mythbusters.
Yeah, I think, and just to plug in advance, in a week and a half, we have an event February 3rd around the social model. I think by definition and by societal standards, we've been kind of trained to think that proper accessibility is at odds with beauty, when accessibility, we found, is really just synonymous with really great design, right? Accessibility in general is present because or rather needs to be present, because society has excluded a group of individuals that we need to now redesign a system for. So, there's that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, accessibility is really usability for
right,
a broader population than most people typically design for. And a lot of it is just historically we've been thoughtless about it. And
right,
I was one of those designers in the 90s that was designing for people like me. And fast forward 30 years later, and it's like, hey, that's not okay anymore. But we still kind of carry that sort of cultural baggage with us today. But
yeah,
so components can fail ADA requirements and actually perform better in human visual tests. Yes, you
yes,
can meet the letter of the law, or you can meet WCAG requirements, but really WCAG requirements are like heuristics, they're standards to build up with, but that doesn't necessarily mean that something is usable. And so really your goal, your objective is usability for people of all different abilities. And that's not necessarily something that you can do with a program, or even that a set of guidelines could meet 100%.
right. And there's, we kind of always go back to, realistically, as organizations, you as designers and engineers and organizations as a whole, depending on the culture and where you fall on the accessibility maturity scale, you want to be accessible, you want to be compliant, you want to be inclusive. But realistically, at certain organization sizes, no organization will put the company on hold to ensure they're absolving all of their accessibility or accessibility compliance debt, right? In the same way they wouldn't for security, they wouldn't for privacy. This is the existence of GDPR. We're seeing the same sweeping changes for accessibility now. You as designers, accessibility is a proxy for user experience. Your job as designers and engineers is to ensure that you can't say proper accessibility if it impairs for meets for one disability but completely excludes another disability, right? The mark of good design is ensuring it's beautiful, it's usable, and it services the business. That's great design. So
one other question in there, as far as like the screen reader, the role of screen readers, because I think I had maybe a different understanding, a different impression of what landmarks might be, because I also have to kind of reconcile a lot of like shortcut functions. But a lot of the things that are that I kind of being serviced is like, oh, this text element wasn't available to the reader. Can you make it 7:1? Where it's not a primary text element at all. It's just kind of this little thing off on the way. So there's just all these kinds of visual things that I feel like, this group inside of B of A basically was just sort of like run the algorithm and then ding them where they need to be dinged, and then just say, make it 7:1. And essentially like a lot of it was like, oh, because we don't have screen reader support, they just want everything black. And so the visual, that's what I meant in like the first question is like, visual hierarchy comes through sort of like a range of color, not just sort of like working with like the most narrow color set possible. And so I was really interested in understanding, like, are there ways that people with accessibility issues are kind of using other mechanisms to kind of offset areas where they have challenge? And is that sufficient as opposed to like, oh, let's just make a text element 7:1?
So let me jump in, because I kind of hear something that I just want to make this real clear. The use case that we have for screen readers here, very specifically, are for people who can't see, like for blind users. So people who aren't able to perceive your page visually, but are getting an audio version of doing this. So this is like the mixtape, it's the cassette version of this.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
And so the 7:1 stuff, that's color contrast. That's a whole entire different ball of wax.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I was thinking that well, maybe there was just low acuity users that were using screen readers. So
In
I was curious.
So there is another case, a use case for screen reader users, like people who have like a really neurodivergent or have really, really severe ADHD. And so they're using something to kind of go along with the text because your eyes, in those cases, don't follow the page the way somebody else's eyes would. So you're using the audio to kind of anchor you as you're trying to read through the page visually. It's a totally different use case. Those folks wouldn't particularly benefit from landmarks,
I see.
in my
Okay.
opinion.
All right. Thank you for helping me understand that broader context. I appreciate it. And thank you for answering those questions.
Did we cover all the questions? I don't think so.
Oh, I don't want to dominate. I'm sure other people have questions, but thank you. I really appreciate it.
I mean, I think first off, thank you for asking the questions because I know that in some presentations I'm not one to ask at all, but there's somebody else that asks, and it was actually the one that I wanted. So I'm sure this is helpful for a ton of people in here. So thank you for doing so. Let me.
This is the perfect point to plug our community, Kat. This is the perfect point to say, like, hey, you have questions like this, come to our Slack and ask those questions, and you're going to get experts answering them.
That's true.
How do we do that? Do we just go to the Stark website and kind of figure it out from there to get into the Slack forum? How do we access that?
Well, you certainly can go that route. On our main homepage in the footer is the Slack link. We have a community page that has this information on it. However, in the chat, our customer success manager, Autumn, just dropped the link for you, which should make life a bit easier.
You know what the best part, Josh, is you're going to get there and you're going to be like, hey, I know so many people there already from this meetup.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Also, Raquel just said, if you need more help, Josh, she's happy to chat through stuff with you. Awesome. Raquel's on the Stark Slack. So
yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is like, born from just like the direct experience of trying to solve some real problems at scale. I've also had to design something that is exclusively keyboard UX for high volume document processing without touching your mouse. And I gained a whole new empathy for people who have to navigate the world without keyboards. I can't even use Gmail with my tab key. So very interesting kind of area that is very clearly underdeveloped. So thank you for all the work you're helping all of us or doing that is helping all of us to kind of figure this stuff out.
Thank you.
Welcome again.
Yeah. Also important to remember that I don't think anybody are experts in this, right? So long as the web and technology in general continues to innovate, it means we'll also need to continually learn. And so it's a very exciting space to be a part of. And yeah, thank you. So we have a couple more questions. Mark asked another question, but I believe Glenn helped Mark out. So there's that. We will skip that, but Mark, if there's any follow-up info, please drop it in the chat so we know. Then we have another question. Let me start from down here. Where we are. Okay. This one is from Niels. Niels said, how do you apply landmarks to web apps which don't follow the typical structure of a regular website? Is there a difference, or can you also apply the same rules? Examples of this are web apps like Spotify Web, Figma, Framer, and this kind of goes back to the question I originally asked at the start of this, is there a difference between web and software? We often think of software as native apps, but not as web applications. So yeah.
So essentially it comes down to this is like, are there fence posts in those apps that you feel are valuable for somebody who's using a screen reader to be able to go forwards and backwards to, and are landmarks the best way of doing that? Now, also in all this conversation, I've carefully avoided the whole subject of ARYA, which is another whole way of taking regular elements and making them present themselves to screen readers like landmarks. So, generally the rule is, ARYA is complicated, it's easy to misuse, it's easy to make mistakes with. And, we've been trying to pursue landmarks instead of ARYA more than anything else to just kind of allow you to follow a path where you can label stuff that's less fraught with errors and that's less risky for you.
Thank you. Glenn left a message like it's a voicemail. Glenn typed a message that said, Joshua was asking about other use cases for screen readers. Blind users, some low vision users might have some sight and want to hear what they can sort of see. Dyslexic users helps keep them focused on the words. ESL, learning how to hear word pronunciation. Cognitive issues, huge categories: autism, ADD, Down syndrome, TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, dementia, etc.
Yeah, so I only really covered the first one and the last one and kind of skipped everything in between. Glenn, I know you from a different Slack community. I hope you will come and join us at the Start community as well and share your wisdom with us. But definitely appreciate you chiming in and kind of filling the gaps into what I was explaining earlier.
For sure. I actually believe Glenn is in our community chat. But please don't quote me. Don't. If you're not Glenn, I'm sorry. I'm almost positive I saw you at one point.
So Glenn, if you're lurking, speak up a little bit more. I mean, we could totally use your good advice there.
There you are. I think we covered a core of them. If there are any questions that went unanswered, I'm trying to skim through. I think we covered them in other areas as like sub questions. If they were not answered, please hop into the Stark Slack community. We're all there. And I promise you, just when you think you should turn to us, I promise you the groups of individuals in that community will blow us out of the water and blow you out of the water. They're phenomenal. So please don't hesitate to hop in there and ask those questions. I think, Claudio, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're coming up on time and we need to, turn it down now.
Right. Well, at least we're not on the free plan that boots us off at 40 minutes, no. Right? Yeah. But thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Definitely join if get someone else to join our meetup groups. At least we can keep you up to date with other future events we're doing. And we've got one coming up on February 3rd for Mike Oliver's birthday. And we're going to be talking in depth about the social model, why it came about. And we've got a couple really, really good panelists joining us with that. So I hope to see you again next Thursday. So have a great day, everyone. Evening, morning. Thanks very much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.